Hi, everybody. My name is Becca Reed Smith, and I'm a mindset and success coach. And I'm really excited to bring you this wonderful masterclass on moving through your fear and self doubt and building resiliency. As you probably know already, if your mindset isn't on point, then you're going to have a very difficult time gaining traction in getting your work out into the world. Even when you have all the tools that you need and you have created a beautiful product for your people, it's going to be difficult to get your work out there because you're stuck in that place of doubt. And that's why I'm here. I want to help you move through those feelings so that you create success and get your work out into the world. So, a little bit about me. I am a trauma therapist turned mindset and success coach. So, since 2008, I've been helping my clients move from surviving to thriving. And what I like to think is that I bring a unique blend to the work that I do, a blend of geeky brain science as well as woo-woo soulfulness, because I want my clients to have everything they need when it comes to tools to successfully navigate through their fear and self-doubt. So let's get started today, and let me tell you a little bit about the objectives that we have on board. So here are our objectives for this masterclass. Firstly, I want to increase your understanding of the brain science behind fear and self-doubt and help you normalize this experience. Secondly, I want to help you learn why improving your mindset improves your overall outcomes for both life and business. And then lastly, I want to help you develop at least 3 skills to activate a positive mindset and increase resilience. So let's dive into the brain science part of all of this. This is so important because, like I said, I want you to understand all of these parts because it helps normalize your experience. You realize that what you're experiencing is a function of your brain. And we all have a brain, thankfully, so we all have similar functions when it comes to the fear and doubt that we experience. So that's why I want to bring you this information. And as I do so, I'm going to try to break it down into small, manageable, understandable, bite-sized pieces. So bear with me a little bit. We're going to move into a diagram, a very primitive diagram, I might add, that outlines where things are actually located in the brain. But for right now, I want you to understand that your fear response, that function of the brain, is super important. It has always been there, and it is there to keep us safe and surviving in the world. So we don't want to get rid of our fear. I think what I hear from so many coaches and from other people as well is that we want to ditch the fear and get rid of it altogether and such. And that is not accurate. Unfortunately, we're never going to get rid of those feelings. And really, we shouldn't get rid of those feelings because, like I said, they are a very important part of how we function in the world. Our fear and doubt is there to keep us safe. The problem is that the brain is so used to being wired for negativity and survival that it perceives different dangers out there when it's just a perception. There are no real dangers. Think of it this way. Going on Facebook Live might make your heart race, but it's not life-threatening in any way, right? Going on Facebook Live is not going to kill you. But interestingly enough, your fight-flight response in that part of the brain is telling you that it is. It's telling you that it's actually something to be afraid of. So let's go into the different parts of the brain and how they all interact with one another. All right, everybody, let's dive into this brain science. Love this stuff because really, like I said, it helps us understand that fear is just a function of our brains. And it's there to ensure our survival and ensure our safety. So it's there for a very good reason, and we just need to learn all about it so we can move through it. And that we can definitely do. So let's start things off here. I wanted to be able to provide you with a kind of a diagram here as to where these systems are located in your brain. So, very primitive diagram that it is, we have to remind ourselves that our brains are three-dimensional in nature. So these systems are actually layered upon one another, starting off with the brain stem, and then on top of that, the limbic system, and on top of that, the prefrontal cortex. So the limbic system and the brainstem and central nervous system all play a super important part in our fear response. To start things off, if we experience some sort of scary stimulus of some kind, the amygdala is actually the part that is trying to make sense of this. Is it a threat? Is it not a threat? What is it? If it is a threat, then it sounds the alarm to the hypothalamus of danger, danger, here's a threat. The hypothalamus is actually what kicks in fight or flight response, and that activates the sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system rather activates the fight or flight system in the rest of your body. So it's kind of that the hypothalamus is saying, hey, we need to get on guard here. And the sympathetic nervous system runs to the front lines and activates the entire rest of the system in your body. So what you'll notice when you're in a fear response is that your heart rate increases. You might have sweaty palms. It actually produces a rush of adrenaline when you're in a state of fear and doubt because you want to mobilize. You want to be able to fight or flee the situation. So that's the simple, in very, very simple terms, the pathway of fear. So you have the scary stimulus response, or that occurs rather, and then the amygdala determines whether or not it's a threat. The hypothalamus activates the central nervous system, and then your body moves into the fight, flight, freeze response. So here's the challenge. One of the things that we notice is that many of us are living in a chronic state of fear or stress or chronic doubt. And if you're in that state all the time, there are lots of hormones that are taking place and running through your body. And that is what's keeping you in that state of constant either anxiety or worry or whatever it may be. And when you're there, let me back up a little bit. You can't access as easily that prefrontal cortex. And let me tell you the important part of the prefrontal cortex, because this is where all the action takes place in an effort to calm the rest of those systems down. That's where our higher order thinking takes place. Our language is there, cognition, sensory perception, all that good stuff. All of our rational thinking takes place in the prefrontal cortex. The problem is when we're in a fear state and we're driven by that lower brain area, that prefrontal cortex isn't even online. We're not even utilizing that part of our brain to make sense of the world around us. So a big part of managing the fear and moving through fear is if you're somebody who might lean towards being anxious all the time or the worry ward or whatever it may be, take those steps to activate that rational part of your brain more frequently. And that's really going to help you navigate around any other fear that might pop up. But if you're in that chronic state of fear and stress and doubt, it's very difficult. So take those steps so that you can move out of that first of all. And then if and when fear things pop up, which they likely will, you'll be able to navigate them far more smoothly. So back to the nervous systems. Like I said, the autonomic nervous system is actually broken into two systems altogether. So the fear response is activated through that sympathetic nervous system. Thankfully, on the flip side of that, we have the parasympathetic nervous system that helps calm everything down. So one is the fight-flight system, the other is the rest and digest. So everything slows down when the parasympathetic nervous system is running the show. And let me tell you, it should almost always be running the show as frequently as possible. That should be the rule, not the exception. Fear should be the exception. Fear should pop up once in a great while. But most of the time, things should be run by the parasympathetic nervous system. So you'll notice that your heart rate is decreased. Your breath is nice and normal and not short and quick. This is a system that really restores homeostasis, which means that sense of calm, that sense of ease. Your muscles relax, and like I said before, you have increased mental clarity, which is exactly what we want so that we can positively navigate our lives, our businesses, relationships, all that good stuff. The other interesting thing I want to point out is that any writer who specializes in the genre of suspense or horror and anything like that is that you're banking on your ability to activate just a bit that sympathetic nervous system in your reader. How interesting is that? That we can read a book and have that system activated, knowing full well we're just reading a book.
So that's how fine-tuned that brain, that part of our brain is that we can be reading something and not even really truly experiencing it and still having the same or similar response as if we were really there. So if that can move us into that sort of stress state, then it doesn't take much in real life to do the same thing. So if we go back to this pathway of fear, I want to give you another example. So if you're experiencing fear in your life around making business decisions or even stepping out of your comfort zone in really any way, that feels scary. If it is talking to an influencer or showing up on Facebook Live, that feels scary. And the thing to remind yourself is that the brain is, like I said, fine tuned for any sort of danger, perceived or actual danger. So all of those things feel rather scary. And this whole pathway of fear actually takes place even when those things are occurring. So your life is not being threatened in any way, but your brain is overactive and it's telling you that this is danger, danger, don't do this, stay in your comfort zone. It's far safer there. Please don't step out of that space. And if we allow it to, that's where our fear will keep us small. It'll keep us small and we won't take action in our lives and our businesses. So remind yourself of that when you are stepping out of your comfort zone, when you are talking to influencers, if you are going live or showing up, whether online or in person, and that fear comes up for you, you can tell yourself, this is just fear, and I don't really have anything to be afraid of.
So, a big part of befriending our fear and moving through the fear is to know when our system is essentially lying to us, that it's just perceived danger and that it's nothing real. It's things that we can move through safely and we're going to survive the whole process. So, here's the last little tidbit with regards to brain science that I find so helpful is the fact that our brains will continue to grow new pathways. No matter our age, we continue to grow new pathways, which means we can learn new material and change the way we process through information. This is called neuroplasticity, which simply means that our brains, like I said, grow new pathways. The other interesting thing is that we prune away the pathways that we no longer need, that we no longer utilize. And that means that when we practice affirmations, we are actually building new neural pathways and pruning away the old ones. So that's why it's so important to do those mantras, do those affirmations, not in the sense that necessarily that it's a woo-woo thing, but there's actual real brain science behind how it works and why it works. So if we rewrite our own story that we're telling ourselves, especially when we're faced with fear and doubt, then we're building that resiliency within us. We're building the way that our brain operates when we feel that way, but also when we're faced with those times that bring about those fears and doubts, we look at them differently. We can look at them with far more confidence and navigate through them with much more ease when we have that positivity, when we have that optimism and the way that we look at the situation itself. So let's dive into some very common mindset hurdles. So one of the biggest hurdles is that of self-doubt. Self-doubt always comes in at the worst time possible. We are often in the midst of feeling in flow. We have all these lovely ideas and we are executing them, and then all of a sudden, self-doubt puts on the brakes. And we have this overwhelming feeling of, oh my goodness, what if nobody likes this? What if it's not good enough? And it just sabotages all of our hard work. And it definitely, at times, if we allow it to, gets in the way of us putting our work out into the world. So as we talk a little bit about self-doubt, many of us experience very, very similar thoughts that come up. Regardless of what we're necessarily doing or putting out into the world, we have similar thoughts. And that is it good enough? Are people even going to like it? What if I fail? What if I succeed? Am I enough? Why do I even bother? So I want to help you learn how to navigate your way through self-doubt. I don't want self-doubt to continue to sabotage all of your hard work and all of your efforts to get your work out into the world. Not getting your work out into the world is absolutely doing a disservice to anybody and everybody who would ever get their hands on that work. Whatever it is that it may be, your work is needed and it is enough. And you are enough. And that is the thing to remind yourself. The other important thing is that there will always be people who do things better than you do. And there will also be people who don't do it as well as you do. But the thing to remind yourself, the most important thing, is that nobody is doing it the exact same way you are doing it, which is why it is so important that you show up in the world and you produce that work and you get it out there. So let me help you move through the self-doubt. And unfortunately, I can't do this for you. And unfortunately, there isn't this necessarily easy 1, 2, 3 steps to reducing the self-doubt. Because really what it comes down to is deciding, making this proclamation that you are not going to be held back by your own self-doubt, that you are always going to believe that you are enough, that your work is enough, and everybody in the world is just waiting for you to show up with this beautiful work. And I think a lot of people get into this space of believing that, okay, I've decided this. I've proclaimed this for myself, that I am enough and I'm going to put this work out into the world. And then they hit that sort of self-doubt wall once again. So remind yourself that this is deciding and deciding and deciding. And so that every single time that little bit of self-doubt comes in, that you decide once again that you're not going to let the self-doubt run the show. And that you are going to be deeply rooted in the belief that you are enough, that you are showing up. Okay? So that's a big part of moving through the self-doubt. The other biggest problem I see for so many folks is the imposter syndrome. The imposter syndrome is always there. It comes out as, well, who am I to put this work out into the world? Who am I to do this and that, or to make this much money doing this kind of work? React to that sort of uprising within yourself with the question of, well, who do I have to be? Because really what it comes down to is that you are enough. Like, who do you have to be to do these things? You. That's all you have to be. And that's the exciting thing. That's what the world is waiting for. So that when that comes up, that imposter syndrome comes up for you, that's how you can answer that. Well, who do I have to be? Just me. I just have to show up in the most authentic, transparent way and bring my work forth to the world. So diving into my tips to help you move through your fear. Here's tip number 1. When you are noticing fear setting in at the thought of stepping out of your comfort zone, I want you to ask yourself these 3 questions. And really do it well and put pen to paper and write all of your answers out. That's really going to be helpful here. The first one is, what's the very best thing that could happen if I do this? So if you're stepping out of your comfort zone and doing something new and different to further your work and getting that work out into the world, what's the best thing that could happen if you do this? Write all of those things down. It's going to be a big old long list, but write them all down. Secondly, what's the very worst thing that could happen? What's the very worst thing? And write all of those answers down too. And then I want you to take a moment to reflect on these 2 lists and how the best things probably outweigh the worst things, and that the worst things are probably not very important. And they're probably quite easy to navigate around. And then lastly, is what I'm going to do going to kill me? And unless you're doing something crazy, it's probably not going to kill you. But this is a very important question to ask yourself. And all of these questions, the purpose of the whole thing is to bring that brain of yours out of fight or flight and into that higher level thinking, that neocortex area. So the purpose of the brain, as I said earlier, is to keep you safe. It needs to know you're safe all the time. And when we ask ourselves these questions, it brings us to that place of being rational. And so the more that your brain understands that you're safe and what you're going to do by stepping outside your comfort zone is in fact not going to kill you, the better chance it has to settle down. And that's what you want to do to move through your fear. So, what's the very best thing that could happen? What's the very worst thing that could happen? And is it going to kill me? Write all of those things out. Tip number 2. Generally speaking, if you notice that you're in a place of feeling as though you're just flooded with all of these fears and what ifs and all of that, write all those fears down. Write all those fears down. And if you want to, you can take it a step further and tell somebody about them. Just read off the list. Because what we're doing here is we're shedding light on these big, scary creatures that we feel like are just taking over and are something huge to be fearful of. But we shine the light on it and we realize, actually, no. Yeah, they're fears, but they're manageable. Again, you can navigate around them more than half the time. And if you can't navigate around them by yourself, you're resourceful enough to know where to go to get the help that you need. And that's also important. So go ahead and shine the light on them and take back your power. Tip number 3, super simple. I want you to start looking at the evidence. So if you have a belief, a self-belief that my work is not good enough, look at the evidence. What is telling you that your work is not good enough? And also, what is telling you that your work is good enough? And being able to see those two piles of evidence. Also knowing full well that sometimes there may be evidence that you believe proves that the work isn't good enough, but if somebody else took a look at things, they might see things differently. So really step back and evaluate things as objectively as possible. So here's tip number 4. Don't get stuck in thought traps. Thought traps are ways of thinking that keep us stuck in our fear and self-doubt. And they keep us stuck and not moving forward. They don't serve us at all. So one of those thought traps is overgeneralization. So for example, if you had one poor review, you are going to assume that all of your reviews are going to be poor. If that's the case, then that's overgeneralization. Because there was one thing that happened one certain way, you then assume that every other thing is going to be something similar. So that is one thought trap. Another one is all or nothing thinking. So if something falls short of perfection, then you assume that it's an utter failure. So clearly all or nothing, black or white. If it's not perfect, then it's a failure. So these things, be mindful of these thought traps. Be mindful of when you notice that your thinking is going in that direction. Because let me tell you, these things will keep you stuck and keep you from moving forward. Tip number 5, use positive affirmations to support yourself in shifting your mindset and rewriting your story. So going back to what we were talking about earlier about brain science, the more we shift what we are telling ourselves, the better off we're going to be. Because, let me tell you very simply, our thoughts become our beliefs and our beliefs become our reality. So we have to be really mindful. If we are telling ourselves really terrible things, if that's what the inner dialogue sounds like, then we're never going to have the motivation or the confidence or anything that's going to propel us forward in getting our work out into the world. So rewrite your story. Even if you had a difficult launch or if your experiences were negative in some way, and that's what's kind of playing in your mind, as we were talking about earlier, that learning center of our brain reminds us of these terrible, terrible things, these failures or these terrible launches, like whatever it may be. So we want to avoid doing those things. But the problem is if we continue to avoid doing those things, then we're never going to get our work out into the world. So we have to backtrack a little bit. And notice when we are replaying that story in our own mind to shift it. And sometimes the very easiest thing to do, one of the easiest affirmations, is I am doing the best that I can. And I've always done the best that I can with what I had. So maybe you didn't have all the information. You were only working with the information you had at the time. So you can slowly make that shift into using that positive affirmation in an effort to change the story, to change the way you think and perceive what's going on. So positive affirmations are really wonderful. Some people feel like they're kind of hokey. Why would I do this? I'm telling you that there's amazing brain science around positive thinking. So it's certainly nothing to turn your nose up at. It's something that truly works. So find a few positive affirmations. You can think of your own. I will include a few in the handout that goes along with this masterclass as well, but to really utilize those on a consistent basis. And what I recommend to all of my clients is to build that into your day. Bookend your day. Start your day off with a few positive affirmations, even before your feet hit the floor in the morning. You say a couple positive affirmations to yourself. And then at the end of the day, as you hop back into bed, say a few more affirmations to yourself. And they could be the same ones, they could be something similar or totally different, whatever feels right to you at the time. But this is going to begin to shift how your mind works and how that story sounds in your head. And that's a very, very big part of mindset work. So as we bring this masterclass to a close, I want to leave you with a few takeaways. The first one being is that fear and self-doubt are always going to be there. You're not doing anything wrong. When those feelings come up, it means you're trying to up-level your life and business. It means you're stepping outside of your comfort zone. It's actually something to be really proud of because it shows that you're trying to expand and grow. And with it comes some growing pains in the form of fear and self-doubt. So give yourself some grace and understand that what you're experiencing is completely normal. The only difference between somebody who's showing up with their work into the world versus somebody who's not is simply that they're moving through their fear versus being stuck and held back by it. So be the person who shows up by moving through all of the fear and all of the doubt that might come up for you, because the world needs your work. And please, please, please decide that you're enough. Decide that your work is enough and that it's worthy of being seen by so many out in the world. You're doing a disservice by not showing up or by not moving through the fear. So please, please, please make that decision and continue to make that decision that you are worthy, that you are enough, and that your work is beautiful and is absolutely needed. The second takeaway that I have for you is the absolute importance of activating that parasympathetic nervous system we were talking about earlier. And that is that calming response to all the stress that we face day in and day out that's related to our lives and our businesses. So a few things that you can do to calm that down on a regular basis are things like deep breathing, engaging in yoga, going for a walk out in nature, hanging out with people who you love and who love you back. All of those things are going to help activate that system that we want activated. Not the fight or flight, but the rest and digest, that feeling of safety and security and all the calmness that comes with it. That's going to help you have the mental clarity that you need to make decisions in your life and in your business so that you can step forward and continue to expand and move through all of that fear and self-doubt that might come up with that expansion. I also want to remind you to take a moment to download the guide that goes along with this masterclass. I provided that additional information to support you on your mindset journey. I highly recommend that diving into that mindset work be the very first thing that you do before you even try to launch anything new in your business. Because if that mindset stuff isn't on point, like I said earlier, it's going to be very, very hard. Harder than it needs to be necessarily. So do the mindset work first, understand what your limiting beliefs are, Move through them, and you're going to move through that fear and self-doubt a lot easier. And the entire purpose is to get your beautiful work out into the world. So you're going to be able to do that with far more confidence and ease, and you deserve that. So definitely take the time and energy and invest that into the mindset work, because the return on the investment is amazing. If you're interested in learning more about me, feel free to check out my website at beccareedsmith.com. You can also follow me on Facebook and Instagram, also at Becca Reed Smith. I want to thank you so much for joining me for this wonderful masterclass, and I hope that it provided you with all the information that you needed to take the right steps in the right direction of creating confidence and ease in your life and in your business, and being able to really move through the fear and self-doubt, all the while knowing that it's always going to be there. You just have to take the steps to continue putting one foot in front of the other and move through it. Thank you so much, and I wish you all the best.